My name is Hector Santisteban, and I've spent much of the last decade trying to figure out what makes a successful podcast. And I come to you on these streams and on my content to try and deliver some of those things to you as well. It seems like we've been having some challenges over the last little bit. It looks like it's not letting us get out to LinkedIn. Such is life, and such is kind of what happens. Um, let's see. I don't know if it's going to let us do it. Let's see if it lets us go live. But if you guys are catching this and you guys can hear me, would love to know where you are tuning in from and where you are catching this from. We're going to talk today about why a lot of shows, why most podcasts don't make money. And I can say this because I've been there. I've tried it, and I know a lot of people, they get into podcasting because they see the Joe Rogans, they see the Call Her Daddies, and they see all these other examples of people getting they see all these examples of people getting they see all these examples of people getting these huge checks for writing podcast, or for starting podcasts. What they don't also see though is that Joe Rogan was also the Fear Factor guy. Of course, there are these Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, who's the Prince of England, and are there some examples of people that have come out of the gates and taken the world by storm and made this podcast thing into a real moneymaker? For sure. There are far more examples of people who have started a podcast and have failed, though. And I think that there's the route of, if you want to start a podcast because you want to make the podcast your business, you want to be what we would call like a creator. I think that has its own route, it has its own path. It's probably the closest thing to a modern day artist, right? Obviously, content is this new medium, and just like someone would chase their dreams being a painter, or chase their dreams being a sculptor, or chase their dreams even being a musician, to that kind of sort of extent. The same sort of thing can be done with podcasts. The challenge is that gets wrapped up into, and there's also people who have a business and who have something, some sort of service. They have some sort of product that they can sell, and they can use the podcast as a way to be able to promote their product, to promote their service, to promote their community, to promote whatever it is that they actually have that's outside of the podcast. And so for today, what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk to those people, because that's who I work with mostly. There are a ton of other people who can speak more to the creator sort of track. Today's episode, we're going to focus on that entrepreneur or that business owner who has a podcast and wants to be able to leverage the podcast in order to make more money for their business. And do I think that it's a great thing for businesses to have? Absolutely. It's one of the best things that a business can do. I was just talking to someone who runs a growth agency on LinkedIn, and he was talking about how a podcast is really, really valuable for his particular client, because a lot of times these large organizations, they have these changes that happen at the top, and then a lot of times it takes so long for those changes to get distilled, for those changes to get communicated down to the front lines. You need marketing material, you need editing, you need, needs to be designed, it needs all these things. And so there is this gap and this sort of runway in between when something comes down from the top, whether it's a certain sort of decision, whether it's a certain type of program or system or protocol, or something that comes down from the top. Well, all of a sudden, you can now take that information and it can be disseminated into the people who need to hear it almost immediately. I mean, of course, there's some turnover and there's some production time and production quality depending upon how well how much you want to put into that. But otherwise, someone can an executive can make a decision. They can hop on a microphone, talk it out with the other executive and share why they made these decisions, why they're making these changes, what changes or additions or improvements they want to see from their team. And within a matter of minutes or hours or however long, that can be out to the team, that can be out to the market, that can be out to their prospects. So a lot of times there's these things that people are wanting, there's a message that people are wanting to convey. And perhaps it's just not it's not quite seen, or it's not quite realized by as many business owners out there, that the value of getting that info out. So let's think that's a good place to start. So when I think about what are the reasons that businesses don't make money off a podcast, I think that it really comes down to a few key things. So the interesting thing is that a lot of these things happen outside of the podcast. When I was taking some notes and kind of making an outline for today's episode, what I realized is that yes, there are a few parts of the podcast that need to be done the right way. Specifically, we want to talk about running your ads the right way. We want to talk about having enough ads in your show, the right kinds of ads. And some of you guys are saying, well, I don't want to do ads. And well, we're going to talk about the right kinds of ads. And then also, obviously, making sure that enough of the right people are listening to your podcast and actually hearing those things. But before that, what I've seen is that a lot of podcasts aren't even ready to get to that place because they don't have a few things in place in order to make the podcast actually work at its highest level. And the first thing is that a lot of businesses are still trying to figure out what it is that they're selling. I talked about this on this show and on these streams a couple of times, but it is really hard to launch a new product or service. Or, well, let me take it back. It's really hard to launch a new business that's like a new product or service while launching a new podcast. I've seen it happen too many times where people they're excited about starting a new business. They're getting into this new field. They're jumping out of the corporate world and they're jumping into entrepreneurship, and they want to start a podcast along with their business to get their name out there and to grow their brand and yada, all these things that a podcast can do. The challenge is that with a podcast, you're trying to figure out so many things, and with a business, you're trying to equally figure out as many things. You're trying to figure out who are you serving, how are you serving them, what are you doing to serve them, what are some of the specifics, who are you specifically serving. There's all these questions that you need to answer that a lot of times you can make educated guesses at the beginning of the process, but you don't actually know what those answers are until you get into what my mentor Qasim Aslam calls the corridor, right? Once you get into the corridor, only then are you able to figure out what are actually the challenges and then what are actually the opportunities as well. So with all that to being said, it's really, really important that you have one established first or the other. I have seen where businesses, they're like, I don't need this to make money. I'm going to start a business, but I don't need the podcast to drive the business right away. The business is going to come afterwards. And the benefit of that is that they can start the podcast, build an audience, and then launch something to them once an audience has been cultivated. Now, obviously that takes more resources. Those people have to be in a little bit different of a little bit different of a place financially because they're not looking to be supported by the podcast. Now, if you do have an offer, if you do have a product, a service, something that you are, that you're selling, something that's going to make the money outside of the podcast, well, one crucial part of that you need to have dialed in is who's buying it. And not only who's buying it, but who's the ideal person that's going to want it, that when you put this in front of somebody, that it's going to make it a no-brainer. Because another thing about podcasts is that they are a very unique selling medium where if you start to sell too much, yeah, you're going to turn your listeners away. I've talked about one of the biggest shows that we've taken, that we took over. When we did take over, they were getting a barrage of 1-star and 2-star reviews. And the reason was because there was too many ads that was playing. Now, the challenge was that we had to keep those ads both because we had sponsors and because the business that owned the show, they wanted to be able to still drive, clients to their own business. So it's not like we could just eliminate any of the ads, but we had to find a way to make the ads integrated into the show. And we had to find a way to make the ads actually something that were, the listeners wouldn't skip and that would actually translate. And so there's right ways to do ads. And maybe we'll get to that today, depending on how quickly we get through some of this stuff. But knowing what you're selling and then knowing who you're selling is really important because the ads on the podcast are going to be, they're not like going to be shove it down your throat sort of things. There's going to be like, hey, here's this really cool thing. You probably are going to like it because you're listening to this episode, so chances are you're really going to like this, and here's where you can go and get it. And it's very, very simple. It's easy, it's quick, and a lot of times because the offer, the product, the service, and because it's so matched to the audience, they don't need a lot of people to be listening to it. So it's really, really important that not only do you know what it is that you're selling, but you also know who it is that you're selling to. Now, one caveat here, and this is something that we can kind of talk about with how to make money with a newer show, this is specifically with regards to that, is that if you, that one route, and of course it has to be done the right way, but one route to monetize a podcast is to look to create revenue through your guests. Now, I do not believe that you should charge your guests to come on a show. I think that's actually kind of weird and perhaps gross. But, to each his own. Everybody does what they got to do. That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm suggesting. What I would suggest is that if you're what I would suggest is that one path to monetization, one route to revenue is finding a way to partner with your guests or finding a way to make your guests your ideal client. And this is a really, what I would call, I don't know if it's a unique strategy, but I think it's a strategy that's great for newer shows, and it's also a strategy that's great for Goodwell. Because if you have something that you're not necessarily going to, and I think this works really well when you have a high ticket service, a high ticket offer, something that is really, thousands of dollars that maybe someone isn't going to buy. It's not like Athletic Greens where, someone can hop on a website and they're going to spend, 20 or 30 bucks. And that's all that it's going to take for them to become a customer. If you're talking, if you're something that is a higher price service or something that's just a service that people, it takes time for them to be able to do, and that they're obviously not going to be able doing based on an impulse buy, well, then a great way to introduce and connect yourself with potential clients is through inviting them on your show. Now, don't make it a pitch fest. What I wouldn't suggest is to make that, I wouldn't pitch at all on the interview. What I found to be the best sort of way to do this is by just creating an amazing experience with your guests. And what's awesome is that when you do that, they're like, "Hey, what do you do? What tell me about you?" And a lot of times just in normal human interactions and when people are enjoying themselves and when you are interested in them, a lot of times they return there's reciprocity there, and they're like, well, what do you do, and tell me about your business. And that's a great segue and a great opportunity to go, well, we actually help businesses like yours, or we help these types of people do this. And I'd love to be able to show you something that we can do. I think that one key thing that I've found that's valuable is it's helpful to have some sort of in between step for the sale, because you don't necessarily want to sell to people on the show, and also people don't necessarily want to feel like they're being sold to. And so a great way to do that is to have some sort of intermediate valuable step that you can either offer as a lead magnet or some sort of ebook or some sort of follow-up thing, which is great because now they can get into your system and kind of get into your follow-up. Or if it's a high enough price service or something that warrants a lot of personalized attention and relationship, well, then what I found is offering some sort of value added consult, right? Hey, I'm not sure if it would be helpful for you, but we can actually hop on and I can show you how to do this really cool thing. And I'd love to do that sometime if you've got some time this week. Something like that, where now you're able to take them from being a guest on the show to now they're coming in with the expectation that you're going to help and support them and do something that they want to do for their business or for their life or health or whatever it is that you help them. But now they had a great experience on the conversation and the interview, and then you're able to turn it and segue it, and they're able to come into that next interaction with a totally different expectation, which I think is huge. So, okay, so we're just kind of on offer though, right? We're kind of going all over the place, but just to recap here, the first thing that you got to have in place is your offer. You got to know what it is that you're selling, who it is that you're selling to. The second thing that you've got to have is some sort of follow up in place, and this is really key. I mentioned a lot of times on this show that I got my first start in business in direct sales, and one of the famous sales kind of authors and trainers, his name was Zig Ziglar, and he was famous for saying that the fortune is in the follow up, and that used to mean calling them or knocking on their door or, going and kind of tracking them down in person, literally just stopping by their office. Today, that could be a form of an email, that can be a social media post, that can be a share, that can be a comment, that can be a like. There's so many different ways for people to be able to be followed up with and for you to stay top of mind with your prospects. But this is really, really important because that follow-up process doesn't happen on its own. And I've seen it happen. We've even had shows of our own where we've got so much work to do, and our own shows we get busy, and sometimes we forget to follow up and let our guests know in the way that they're supposed to, right? We when we're producing a show, it's kind of like that gardener that's grass is all overgrown. But for the shows that we produce, what we do is we send the guests a notice saying, "Hey, your episode's coming out soon." When it's out, we let them know that, "Hey, here's your links and graphics and goodies and stuff." Afterwards, we follow up with them and say, "Hey, do you need anything?" And we make it, a really, it's not a thorough experience, but it's something that gives them plenty of opportunities to ask questions, plenty of opportunities to get everything that they need, and then plenty of us an opportunity to stay top of mind and also give any different call to actions or ask any questions. Because on every time that we are sending those messages, we're asking for some other sort of call to action. Leave us a review. Do you want to hop on a consult? Those sorts of things. So that way, the business and the service stays top of mind as well. So all of that comes because the podcast is just a great opportunity for people to get connected. I don't know if anybody's even listening right now, but if you're catching this on the live stream, wherever you're catching this, I just want you to know that I love you. I appreciate you and honored and humbled that you'd be here. And if you've got questions or anything, definitely let me know, and we'll kind of go from there as well. But let's keep rolling. So I had my notes here. That's why I take notes, because I'm pretty sure I have ADHD and don't know how to stay on track if I don't have it. So we got the follow up. Okay, so we had the offer. We got the follow up. The next step is the opt in, and this is, I've kind of mentioned this a little bit. This is that lead magnet, that ebook, that download, that training series, that consult. What's the thing that that's going to make someone say, "Yeah, I want to do that too"? Because what's great is that a podcast interview, it's really easy and really simple to get your foot in the door. A lot of people are excited and open to come on podcasts. People that you might not otherwise be able to connect and talk to are now talking to you because you have a podcast. Fantastic. Well, how do we take that and how do we actually turn that into them becoming a client? Well, the intermediate step that I found is this value step. And in the more that you can know about your clients, your prospects, the more that you can know about the challenges and the issues that they are going through, then better that you're going to be, right? That's what I wanted to do. Sorry, page editors. Let's take that out. So let's try that again. I was adjusting some stuff on the live stream here. The more that you know about your prospects, the better that this part is going to be. And the reason is that your lead magnet, your consult, how it's positioned, the value that you're giving there is going to determine who opts in and who says yes, I want that, and who raises their hand and who doesn't. And the more that you can get, the more of the right people that you can get to opt in and raise their hand and come in with the right sort of mindset, well, the better. And so figure out what that is. A lot of times it might be something that you've already gotten, you've already created, like an ebook or like, a video series or some sort of, even like a podcast series, things like that. But you definitely want to think about, how is this serving me, and is it actually doing is it not only identifying the right types of prospects, is it helping me figure out what types of prospects are in the right mindset, in the right state, in the right place to be able to buy, or and also, is it helping them to move further along that process? Is it helping them to go from a stage of being, only aware of their problem to now being aware that I have a solution? Is it showing them that, hey, I have some expertise? Hey, you have some experience in it, that you've done this with other people, that you have case studies, all these sorts of things. Is that actually happening? Because that would be the next step, right? Because the more that you can do that, the easier it's going to be for those people to actually turn into clients. So that's what I would say about the first steps, right? So we've got our offer, which we talked about. We've got our opt-in, our follow-up, and our opt-in. And those are all the things that happen outside of the podcast, because we haven't even talked about what to do with the podcast yet. And that's because I actually covered that on a recent stream where we covered the types of ads, the different types of ads, pre-rolls and mid-rolls and features and end rolls and all that sorts of stuff. And then we talked about how to utilize them in the different ways and which that you can utilize them. So go check out that stream and that episode if you haven't listened to that. But these are the things that happen outside of the podcast, and I think that this is what most people miss. The last thing that I want to spend some time on here, though, is how to get your first sponsor. And we're going to go a little bit different than what most people might think. Now, if your show is already getting, let's say, a few thousand downloads a week, right? So you're getting, like 10,000 downloads a month. You probably could go and just shop the traditional sponsor route, find some people who want to get in front of an audience like yours, and if you have enough, about 10,000 downloads, you probably could get something that is significant enough, depending upon where you're at in your life and your career and all that sort of stuff, where people might pay you, some decent sort of money, right? It's not going to be groundbreaking. You're not going to be able to, you're not going to become a millionaire overnight with 10,000 downloads a month. But I'm sure that there are a number of podcast companies that would, a number of companies that would work with you. If you're less than that, though, which I know a lot of people are, especially a lot of businesses are, they're getting a few hundred, a few, really a few hundred listeners, so maybe a thousand or two downloads a month, which may not sound like not a lot initially, but I always liken it to, if you had 100 people showing up in your office every week to come and listen to you speak, like, does that change things? Like, if you think about it, if you had 100 people show up into your office every week, like, you would have problems. You'd need chairs. You would need more space. You'd need more room. And so to not properly give yourself credit, and then to not realize the value of having those 100 people listening to your podcast, is just doing your show a detriment, right? Like, if you had 100 people show up into your office every week, what would you do? How would you treat them? What would you talk about? What would you offer them? How would you leverage that into not only doing more for your business, but also helping them more as individuals? Like, all of a sudden, if you could see those 100 people, I bet it would make it more, it would seem more real. But because you can't see them, you don't even see profiles, you don't see usernames, you don't see anything, there's really a big disconnect between podcast hosts and their listeners. But having that mindset, right, of knowing that, okay, it doesn't take thousands for it to be profitable. We've got a show in a particular niche where there's probably only a couple of thousand people in this niche, in this space, in this role that could even listen to the show anyways. And so they're not going to have tens of thousands of downloads. But what's interesting is that they have dozens of downloads, and those dozens of downloads are ringing through the industry. That because the people who matter in the industry are listening to this show, it's actually making an impact. It's actually making, there's a trickle through the entire industry because a few dozen people perhaps are listening to this one show. And if you think about what that does for the business that is creating that content, all of a sudden it creates, I don't know if power is the right word that I like to use, but it gives them so much authority, it gives them so much expertise, and it gives them the power to be able to get a message into and out to their industry, and also position themselves as the whatever, right? Whether it's the movement makers, or whether it's the trendsetters, or whether it is the people who have the answers, whatever it is, there's an opportunity to position themselves as they want to be positioned because they are the ones creating the content, and they're the ones that have the people that are paying attention. And a lot of times in most industries, there's not a lot of people making content about and for your industry, and so this is something that can really be um, a game changer for a lot of people. All right. So okay. So we talked about the mindset, right? Which is obviously understanding that you have, that you have enough people. The second thing that you want to do in terms of getting your first sponsor is I would consider self-sponsoring, right? Is there a way that your business, if you were to put two, one or two or three, depending how much you want to do it the right way. Go listen to the previous stream if you want the specifics on how to add in all those ads. But if you added in one or two ads to your show every week for you, would that make more sense and would that be more beneficial than you finding a sponsor for the show? There are some companies that we work with that they sell one contract for 50, 60, $100,000, and it pays for the production costs kind of tenfold with one client. And so it's much more valuable for them to put their promotional efforts behind their own company than it is to sell someone else's stuff. So I would first ask that question: do you have, does it make sense for you to self-sponsor? And if that's the case, well, then that's the easiest. You've already got your first sponsor. All we got to do is figure out how do we sell more stuff through your show, and that's what that other stream is about. The second thing is you might decide though that okay, it does make sense for us to try and leverage our audience to make some money, right? That yes, maybe things are rolling for your business, but that you've got enough going with your show, you want to diversify your income streams. Okay. What I would suggest is finding a sponsor, finding something that you already use, something that you already are familiar with, even something that you might even have a relationship with the leadership of that company, and reach out to them directly. It's very unlikely that, unless you're a really big show, that these typical podcast sponsors like BetterHelp or Manscaped or whatever ones that you see, Athletic Greens, right? Like whatever podcast sponsors are around right now, you might have a chance with them, but it's much more likely if you've already got some sort of personal connection or personal relationship with the product or with the leadership, because they're much more likely to kind of go out on a limb and to take a flyer on you and to try something out. And because they know you, or because you've got the personal conviction behind the product, that there's a much higher likelihood that it's going to succeed. And so think about the products and services that you use, and then also think about who which ones might be fitted for your audience, and just reach out to them. Just the other day we reached out to an app that I use pretty frequently to see if they want to partner with one of our shows. And and we got a response, and we're kind of we're working through it and figuring that out, and we're not there yet, but I sent a message, and this one message was even through like their company request form and stuff. So there are avenues and opportunities for you to be able to start these conversations, but start there, right? Reach out. One little asterisk is that you might find companies that have affiliate or partner programs already. Those are okay places to start, but I've found, and just in the people that I've talked to, and that I trust in this matter, that establishing and creating your own partnership with them, something that where there's not a 1,000, 10,000, a million other people kind of out there selling that same product, would is helpful. Where you're kind of one of the select partners or something like that. It's gonna is tends to have a better chance of success. So there's that part, right? Then another key. So we've got our list. We're gonna reach out. A lot of people ask like, what do I? How do I sell? And there is a lot of advice on this out there. Coming from a salesperson and coming from a person who knows that you're not probably going to be selling on CPM or just your downloads, finding a way to integrate your promotion across different platforms, but then making it really simple for them to understand is going to be crucial. Here's what I mean. It's very easy and very helpful to think about selling one episode of sponsors for, let's say, $100 or $200. Pick your number, right? Whatever you want. Selling an episode and then selling a season of episodes, right? That way someone can buy a sponsorship for one episode, or they can buy, sponsorship for a number of episodes. A season could be 10, could be 20, could be however long that you want. Just pick your numbers, right? 100, 1,000, 100, 2,000, whatever it is, right? Depending on how many episodes it is. And just start there and see what happens. And what I would encourage you to do is not only, now, this is not advice that a lot of people would give for bigger shows. I understand that. For a business that's trying to kind of get some revenue coming in from their show, it helps to also include social promotions and email promotions, and to let them know that it's going to be an integrated kind of marketing approach, not just we're going to read your ad for 30 seconds on the episode. So that way that they see that it's more than just this one placement, but it's really going to be this integrated kind of comprehensive holistic approach. And then you just got to go and start shopping. Start shopping. The more that you can reach out to people that you already are connected with, or the products and service that you're already connected with, the better off that you're going to be. And so I would start there and continue to add and rinse and repeat and try and try and try again. Um, but once again, you might realize that your business is the best thing that you can sell stuff for. And so, you might just go back and listen to some of these other streams about how you can self-sponsor and how you can actually start driving revenue through for your own business through your show. All right, y'all. I found a way to talk for longer than I thought I would, but it's right at about noon, and gotta hop off to another recording. So I appreciate y'all being here. If you have any questions, let me know. But we'll see you on the next one.